welcome to this week's edition of the Long Haul Partner video tutorial series. This video is going to be part 2 of the last series we did on the OO weekly expense sheet. You may recall that in part 1 we went through the standard data. Let's go take a look at this. We went through the standard data items. We went through fixed expenses per tractor per week, and we also went through fixed expenses per trailer per week. Today, part 2, we're going to be talking about variable driver expense per practical mile. You may recall practical miles are, of course, your actual driven miles. They are very likely different than what you're being paid for. Trucking, we have paid miles, some call it short miles. And practical miles are something else. On this example, you may recall, we were estimating that our actual driven practical miles would be 8% greater than the mileage we were being paid for on a zip code basis. And then finally, we will get to variable driver expense, other variable expense, and then finally our rules of thumb. So let's get going here with the variable driver expenses. The first one on the list here is kind of useless. I include it just for the sake of thoroughness. It's workman's compensation insurance. Now, it's set to 0 because in trucking, we typically don't use workman's compensation insurance. I used it here just in case someone does. But what we do carry is occupational accident insurance. This replaces workman's comp coverage, and we have $52 a week in there for that item. So the workman's comp item is 0. I hope that's not too terribly confusing. And the meal allowance item, I've got set to 0 for this example. We're going to ignore it. I have that item in there because I wonder sometimes if it doesn't make sense as owner-operators that we should offer as a benefit a reimbursement to ourselves as a driver for a meal allowance. For example, if at 4 cents per mile for 2,500 miles a week, you'd have a meal allowance of $100 a week. You'd have to check with your tax people, but an expense reimbursement, if you consider meals an expense, this would become non-taxable income because it's a reimbursement. Now, I'm not a tax guy, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if that's illegal or not, but I put it in here for folks to think about. Health and dental insurance, if you're paying about $600 a month or so, that's going to work out to 5 cents a mile if you're driving at 2,376 practical miles a week, which of course came from the 2,200 miles paid per week. Percent of earnings contributed to retirement account. I've got 3% plugged in here. The way to look at this is a matching fund payable by the truck or business, depending on how you think about it, to you as a driver employee to your 401k or whatever other retirement fund you may have set up. This is in here because although it is income to you as a driver employee, it is a cost to the business. Now, if we put in 3%, for this, 3% of the driver's salary, we've got 40 cents a mile plugged in here. This is 1 cent per mile is the actual contribution, and this auto-calculates for you. That's all these green boxes auto-calculate. Then we've also got in here as an expense to the business of the truck is the payroll burden. Typically, you're looking at 7.65% for CUDA and FICA together. Now, usually, we do self-employment tax as small business, LLC, or whatever you are. Either way, it's going to come out to about 15.3%, whether you're doing Social Security, self-employment tax, or whatever. I've got 6 cents a mile plugged in here. That's 15.3% of 40 cents a mile in itself. Gives us a total subtotal variable driver expense of 52 cents per mile. Okay? Food, as you may recall, it's federal unemployment tax. figure about 56 bucks per year per employee for that. You can look in the code and see how it's covered. I've got some other variable expenses also for practical mile. That's our actual duty mile. For this example, we're assuming average diesel fuel cost at the pump is $3.95 a gallon. Again, for 2,376 practical miles, that is going to work out to 63 cents a mile. Now, again, I want to point out here, this is your average estimated per mile fuel cost under load. And part of that calculation, let's scroll back up to the top, is coming from the very first number we entered in under standard data, which was our average miles per gallon at 55 miles an hour, fully loaded. I plugged in 6.25 miles per gallon here for that. Alright, so now on this auto calculation for our fuel economy, that just auto-calced us at this 63 cents per mile to drive that truck. Now, let's assume for today that you're driving a 2010 or newer truck. You probably got select catalytic reduction in there, SCR. That means you got a DEF tank for your diesel exhaust fluid. I usually figure about a penny a mile for that. Your state road tax, state fuel tax, this can vary a lot. I've plugged in here 3 cents a mile for your state road tax, 4 cents a mile for state fuel tax, depending on your state and how it all works and how they assess it. These could vary quite a bit. Now, we're back to the excess mileage penalty if you lease. Remember again, back up in standard data, we had said that our lease agreement for our truck, because we've leased our truck, we didn't buy it outright, has a 120,000 mile per year maximum mileage in it. If we go over that, we're assessed 4 cents per mile. Well, down here, we're being assessed 0.002 cents per mile because we went over that, right? This auto calculates for you. Again, up here, you got to check your lease and get the correct numbers in here. In your lease agreement, if you're at 132,000 miles, this back charge is probably as high as 9 cents. Check your paperwork, and it'll be in there somewhere. Now, tolls, I've got them in here at 0. I've got bumpers in here at 0. But really, that's probably not correct. Unless, if you're a company driver, if you're a carrier lease driver, you're probably being reimbursed for these, so they are correct. But for a fully independent, you'd be paying these. I'm going to leave them 0 for today, just simply because I have no idea if you ever drive anywhere where you're having toll roads or whatever, like Chicago, and Ohio, New Jersey, so forth. The Northeast guys have probably got some good numbers programming for that. And this brings us down to subtotal variable expenses at 71 cents a mile. That's again based on practical miles. Now we've got, in the OO weekly expense sheet, 4 rules of thumb that all that nonsense that we plugged in above give us. And these are nice for making business decisions on loads you're going to take and other things. For example, based on 2,200 miles paid per week average, okay, with 8% overage, and paying yourself 40 cents a mile to drive the truck, and of course the fuel cost is 63 cents. Your estimated fixed cost per on-duty hour is $24.49. Now, this is based on 60 hours and 7 days. Okay, it kind of goes by your logging on-duty hours. Next, we have another rule of thumb: estimated fixed cost per hour based on a 24-hour day. So now, forget your on-duty 14 hours a day. Now we're talking about your 24-hour day, right? And your truck is costing you $8.75 an hour, all right? This is based on 168 hours in a 7-day week, okay? Now, this is by the ticky-tacky clock, not by your duty clock. So that takes us to estimated fixed cost per day, $210. Now, this is based on a 24-hour day, of course, and this number is huge because this is your cost to sit, isn't it? If you're going to look at a $1.85 load that you can pick up today in an hour, 2 hours, versus picking up a load that pays $2.05 tomorrow at this time, you're going to sit all day today. Does that difference justify your spending $210 on your fixed expenses? Because that fixed expense cost, remember, that's ticky-tacky every minute of every day. That's for your truck payment, your insurances, all the things that you have to pay, regardless of whether or not you're sitting at home or you're working. That brings us now estimated total operating cost to run per mile. Now we're looking at both fixed and variable expenses together. And based on 2,376 practical, that's driven miles per week, it is costing you $1.85 per practical mile to drive your truck. All right? Now, another way to look at it, if we took that $1.85 and we took our 63-cent fuel cost out of there, you're at $1.22. So on this all weekly expense thing, we're seeing that your bare cost to drive your truck is $1.22 per mile plus fuel. Okay? Now if we take the 52 cents per mile out of the driver-employee part, it's costing you 70 cents a mile just to operate the truck. That's with no labor cost to you and with no fuel. This is a very, very important number here, and it shows you why excuse me, it is so difficult to make the carrier lease programs work. Although in the carrier lease programs, a lot of your insurances and authority costs and so forth are borne by the carrier, and so this number is much lower. But we'll get into that in another tutorial down the road. I hope I've helped you go through how you fill out the weekly expense sheet. And in a tutorial coming up, we're going to go through how this sheet feeds into the take it or leave it calculator. And the take it or leave it calculator is a calculator that can compare different loads, as many as 4 different loads. We'll be going through some tutorial examples of that to show you how you can use take it or leave it in your trip planning to increase your income by as much as 25, 50, 75, even 100%. Anyway, this is Bruce. Thanks for tuning in for this tutorial. Please drop me an email if you've got any questions or concerns. And thanks for checking in.